Hey friends, welcome to the Raising Boys and Girls podcast. I'm Sissy Goff.
And I'm David Thomas.
And I'm Melissa Trevathan.
And we're so glad you joined us for this conversation. Let's dive in.
Hey, David Thomas.
Hey, Sissy Goff.
I think maybe we need to start this episode off with a little explanation. This has to do with where I'm going to go when I talk about stumbling and building. A little explanation of a hardship going on in your life, because maybe it will engender empathy in our listeners.
I love that practice. And I do have a hardship. And she's sitting below me right now. She's only 12 pounds at this point. I have a 9-week-old puppy named June who is bringing so much joy and delight into my life. Alongside so much work and frustration. I have officially lived long enough to have forgotten all of what's involved in having a puppy, and you've been so kind to remind me and cheer me on. You give me more pep talks in the last 72 hours than any other time in our friendship, and I'm grateful.
Well, now we know. We always are so freely giving people advice to get puppies, and now we know.
We're remembering because it was a long time since we've been in this stage.
We're cheering for you. We feel empathy for you.
Yes, we do.
And even more, both of us with new puppies than we did 6 months ago.
Well, and we were just with some dear friends, folks we love, who just had their third baby recently. And I said to them, speaking of empathy, I had prayed more for you all in the past week than I have throughout our friendship and knowing you. And at 2 a.m. in the mornings when I'm up doing June's middle of the night, I'm just like, praying for you all. So it's giving me all kinds of opportunity for growth in this category we're discussing today.
So y'all have been there with us with people or puppies. So just periodically, one of us might go, Patches, June. I won't yell at June, I promise. I have this view. I wish that y'all could see her. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, you might have to hop over and start watching on YouTube just to see June. But I have a view right now of her little face and her little blonde eyelashes, and it's just melting me. If I forget that it's my turn to talk, it's because I'm just staring at her. She's so darling.
When she's asleep, she is darling indeed.
She is.
When she's awake, she's a different animal.
She hadn't grown into her ears either. It's kind of flopping around her little face.
Well, I'm excited we're having this conversation.
Me too.
Really excited. And you know, I was remembering that when we wrote this chapter, I put a verse in it that I absolutely love from Romans. This is Romans 12:15-16 that says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn, live in harmony with one another." And the Message translates the scripture in this way. I love it. I had this on a note card in our house when my kids were growing up. Laugh with your happy friends when they're happy. Share tears when they're down. And a great foundation as we think about empathy and what we want to be working toward in our journey of developing more of that so that we can laugh and celebrate with the people we love and we can be sad and show up for people we care about in the hard times too.
Yeah.
So,
and it's such an important one to teach. And I think something we don't talk about enough. I was reading and being reminded that most cognitive theorists say that kids aren't capable of empathy till around 8 or 9, although at 5 is the heightened season of fairness.
I believe that.
So they're very aware of that, but the empathy often doesn't kick in, which doesn't mean we don't try and teach it and we're not doing the things to practice developing it, but it's going to be harder for them before the age of 8 or 9. It's a great thing to remember for those of us who love littles. Yes.
It's a great reminder.
It is. Okay, can I read you a definition from the book?
Please.
Says, we could think of pity as noticing that a friend has fallen in a hole and feeling bad for him that he's down there. Sympathy is lying down on the side of the hole to talk to him while he's there. Empathy is getting in the hole with them until help arrives, knowing that company is the best help of all.
I love that.
Which is what we want our kids. I mean, what an important building block of emotional connection, of relationships. And again, I think we can't say enough right now something that is significantly lacking in our world.
It is. In our world.
Yes.
Not just with kids.
Yes.
With grown-ups as well.
So will you start us off by talking about a stumbling block for boys?
I'd love to. And when we teach on this topic, we have long said that we both really believe that empathy is a foundational ingredient in all healthy interpersonal relationships. So parent to child, brother to sister, spouse to spouse, friend to friend, coworker to coworker, empathy is a game-changing ingredient and something, again, that we all want to be working toward. But when I think about some stumbling blocks that get in the way to boys developing here, I would say, and I want to be very careful to flesh this out as I say what I'm about to say, because I think it will sound concerning when I use this word in a minute, but I would argue that I think competition for boys can be a real stumbling block. And hear me say with great certainty and great clarity, you've heard me talk about this before, I'm such an advocate of sports for boys. I think it is an amazing context for so much skill development and even for developing empathy. But I have worked with a lot of boys over the years who only exist in athletic contexts. Like that's kind of their whole world. And what I think can happen at times is that they get really comfortable in the posture of being against someone and not for someone. Like they're always thinking about the other as an opponent, and it's my job to win. It's my job to dominate. It's my job to be over you in some way. And so we're going to talk about how to remedy that in a few minutes when we talk about building blocks. But hear me say with great certainty, I want boys to play sports. I want them to be active. I want them to have all the great growth opportunities that come in that space uniquely. And I want them to have other opportunities as well, where they are practicing being for someone as much as they're practicing being against. Because I even talk a lot about how much I see competitive patterns spill out into boys relationally. And so, I think about how many elementary, middle school, high school boys groups I did over the year where some boy might in our check-in time say, hey, I had the winning goal in the soccer game on Saturday. And it occurred to almost no one to say, that's awesome, or how did that feel, or what was it like, or how'd your team respond? It's, well, I set a PR in track.
Yes.
I had the winning touchdown. Like it's all this one-upping, all this dominating, all this, again, I'm going to win over you, that I think can become an instinctive relational pattern for a lot of boys. And you have even had some high school girls, I remember us having a conversation about this at times, talk about having had boys pursue them. And then it was kind of like when the pursuit was over and they kind of won their affection or their attention, they weren't all that interested anymore. And so I even see it show up in dating for boys in those ways. And so it's just where we're going to talk in a few minutes about being in other contexts so that he can develop more fully, I guess is the best way I could say it. What about for girls?
I love that. Well, let me start off by saying Richard Weisbord, who is a psychologist out of Harvard, did something called the Making Caring Common Project to help kids develop empathy. And he said empathy is the key to preventing all types of bullying.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
It's incredible.
The key to preventing all types of bullying. Yes. So if I were going to say right now, the number one stumbling block that I believe is in place for girls to building empathy, we're going to talk about more on social media, but the top one, I would say, it's technology. Hands down. And certainly social media, but I believe even just technology itself. And I think it impacts two things primarily. I mean, it impacts a lot of things, but two of the things in light of empathy. One is, I think the way that technology is set up today, it is hindering our development of patience. It's blocking our development of patience. I would say even in myself, I noticed, so I use an app a lot myself that is a video related app, and the pro version, you can 1.5 or double speed someone. Now, a lot of us do that with podcasts. A lot of us do it with audiobooks. I do it with people, which says so much about me as an Enneagram 1 and a perfectionist. I want to move quickly. I want things to be efficient. And I was with a friend recently who I double time on this app in person, and I found myself so impatient. Like the normal pace of conversation was too slow for me. And not only was I impatient, but what always follows for me is that I get irritated. One follows the other. And I think not just, I mean, a lot of kids aren't on these apps, but the rapidity, is that the word? The degree of fastness that things move on technology is wiring our brains to expect that degree of fastness. And so empathy requires us to slow down. Number one, it requires us to slow down. And y'all, we're not doing it with technology. And so all of us have to have breaks. And I want kids to be connecting with other kids in real time. I wish every kid was in some type of small group, whether it's sports, whether it's a Bible study, whether it's a counseling group, but they need other places where they're interacting with kids in real time. I mean, I can think of a child that I counseled who was doing online school, and I think she lost so much empathy because she was only on a screen and not with kids in person. So, number one, I think it impacts our patience. Number two, obviously, we know that we're watching the highlight reel, and empathy is not only built on patience and time, but it's built on hearing the feelings and failures of others. And when I'm watching people on social media, I'm not seeing any of that, unless it's some dramatic thing where they're crying or something on social media. But otherwise, we're not seeing the day-to-day, I felt discouraged, I really blew it. We're not seeing that, and kids aren't seeing that. We know it's the highlight reel. We talk about it. Even when we say that out loud to them, they are not absorbing that. And so I think it's a huge reason that I am seeing girls meaner than I've ever seen them, because I think they have lost that ability to get down in a hole with their friend and sit with them until help comes, knowing that has so much impact. And so I think being in real time and with kids who are sharing about what's going on in their lives. I talked to a girl just this week who is really struggling relationally. And she said the one place she feels connected to kids is in her advisory group at school. Their school has a small group that meets regularly where they're talking about things. So wherever it is, you have to help them find it. They need to have to sit with kids who talk slow and who share their feelings and share their failures to learn, even know how to be happy with their friends when they're happy and shed tears with their friends when they're sad.
Yes.
So
That's
technology
so
is
good.
mine. Well, I need to slow down my technology app just to help me be aware of it too. That's a good reminder, challenge for me this week. Did I tell you, David, that Henry and I have started playing card games?
Some of my sweetest memories from my kids growing up were playing card games. I love that y'all are doing that. We still play when they come home from time to time.
Well, my other favorite pastime with him is building KiwiCo projects.
Your house is turning into a KiwiCo showroom.
Yes, it is. Projects everywhere. KiwiCo delivers seriously fun learning for kids of all ages through hands-on projects and activities.
Each month, kids receive crates packed with engaging, hands-on activities designed to introduce them to exciting science, technology, and art concepts. There's always something new for kids to discover, like engineering robots or learning about the science of ice cream, which is my favorite kind of science.
David, I just ordered the boys a Christmas countdown train set advent calendar.
I saw the sensory solar system you built with WIT.
Did you see the pixel art light box I built with Henry?
I thought it was a light bright, and I went straight back to 1976.
Each KiwiCo crate is designed by real experts and tested by kids to ensure that every experience is age-appropriate, engaging, and seriously fun.
It can be hard to find creative ways to keep your children engaged, challenged, and off their screens. There's something for kids of all ages.
There's no commitment, so you can pause or cancel anytime.
Cultivate your child's natural curiosity while encouraging them to be an innovator and creative thinker.
Redefine learning with play. Explore projects that build confidence and problem-solving skills with KiwiCo.
Get 50% off your first month on any crate line at KiwiCo.com with promo code RBG.
That's 50% off your first month at KiwiCo.com, promo code RBG.
Well, as you accept that challenge, I give you permission to always speed me up because I have a real
No.
long, slow Tennessee drawl. So I don't take offense if you need to accelerate me.
No.
But let's talk about some building blocks. I'm going to jump in first and say, I think the building block I want to encourage parents to consider for boys is context. So we talked about competition being a great context for skill development, but also that's the only place that he operates a lot of against versus for. I want him to have a context for service. I want him to have a context for practicing civility. Like I want there to be context for him moving outside of himself on behalf of another person. And, it's interesting to me. I was thinking the other day, how many times in my first 10 years of doing this work, I heard boys talk about their Eagle Scout ceremony, or I got invited to an Eagle Scout ceremony. And that hasn't happened one time in the last 10 years that I've heard a boy talk about that.
Really?
And I certainly know there are still young men in this world who are pursuing that, but I'd be interested to see the statistics at this point, and guessing fewer than ever, because that's a long, slow process. And it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of service, and it's a lot of endurance, and it doesn't come immediately. And I'm concerned the way we've structured a lot of extracurricular experiences and the practices around that it's kind of edged out that opportunity for a lot of young men to participate in that or have time to pursue something that's that lengthy. And I'm grieved because I think that's one of the few, it's not the only, but one of the few contexts that is so service oriented where, even the completion project is I have to do something on behalf of another and clock in a lot of hours, a lot of time in service of another person. And even the, Scout motto involves service. And so I just want to encourage parents to be thinking about how could that be happening in the everyday of your life together as a family, that we're regularly thinking about an elderly person who lives on our street, that we are regularly thinking, how could we rake leaves for them? How could we walk their dog for them? How could we bring food if they're sick? That we are attentive to the needs of our church communities, that we're attentive to families in our school communities that might be struggling, that allow boys to practice empathy and sit in the center of service. And I mentioned civility. As Sissy and I record this, we're in the midst of an election season, and there is sadly very little civility happening in our world right now. And kids getting to sit front row and see grown-ups say things like, you know what, I see that differently, but I hear you. Or we land on different sides of that issue, but I respect you. Like the practice of empathy within the context of disagreeing with someone, that I just think civility is becoming a lost art. I had a elementary school teacher say to me recently, Sissy, that for decades, she's a seasoned teacher, she would require families to watch the presidential debate together, and kids would come back in and talk about it. And she was like, I would never give that assignment anymore because I'm so concerned of what kids might see and hear. How sad is that reality, that was an assignment we lived through as elementary age kids. And so because there is less evidence, we're going to have to work harder to provide context for kids to get to see that, but how necessary I think it is to building empathy in kids and that understanding. So I don't know that any of us are super excited we're in an election season with this current political climate, but there is good opportunity. Let's see where we could take advantage of that. And knowing that, last thought, it's also going to provide a context for practicing restraint and regulation. I talk a lot in the empathy chapter about that famous quote I love, that you can practice being right or you can practice being kind. And I was thinking about it when you talked about the heightened sense of fairness. I know a lot of boys well beyond 5 who just want to be right all the time. They want to major in fairness, justice, and rightness. And my favorite word in that quote is practice, because I do think there are some of us in the world that bend more toward being right, and we get to practice being kind. And I think it's not just being nice. I think it's, sometimes kindness means I'm going to practice silence. I don't need to have the last word. I don't even need to offer my opinion to that conversation. I need to just honor another person's humanity or their dignity or their integrity. And so let's do a lot of thinking about what that looks like in this season. Let's do a lot of pointing that out. I had a middle school boy. I was in a great conversation with him about civility at one point, and he was like, David, I can't even find it on ESPN anymore. Like, players argue with referees all the time. Coaches yell at referees. Like, he was calling out this reality that there just are so few spaces where he gets to see any evidence of what that looks like on grown-ups. So, grown-ups, I'm challenging myself as I challenge you. Let's think about how we can offer more of that. What about building blocks for girls?
Such a great reminder. Well, I want everybody who's listening to go back and listen to our recent episode with Amy Jacobs on perspective taking.
Yes.
And I love that she talked about that as we were talking about perspective, because I think perspective taking is one of the best building blocks for girls and boys that we can teach. And we can start really young on that.
Yes.
That we can ask questions like, what do you think that person feels? What do you think's going on with them? Even to watch, I love that. We've talked about this before, but cartoons and the large eyes and the emotions that you can see. I mean, I will so often look at Henry and say, what do you think that person's feeling? He knows every time. And I love it. It makes me so happy. And so to teach, to ask questions like that, where we're not just saying it for them, but we're asking them to do the thinking that is required of empathy. I would highly recommend, if your child doesn't have it on their reading list at school, not just watching the movie Wonder, but reading the book.
Yes.
Because I love that book and I love that movie. But what I love especially about the book is it tells the same story from different people's perspectives. So you understand what it's like to live inside his little brain and in his sister's brain and his mom's brain. So I would recommend reading Wonder too. And just continuing to ask really good questions, any opportunity. And I think doing things for them too. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But certainly helping them connect the dots on perspective taking is really important.
Great.
I remember a girl I was seeing years ago who was not good at perspective taking saying to me that there was a new girl in her grade. And she said, I'm so annoyed by her. And my mom keeps asking if I've made friends with her yet. And I said to my mom, what am I supposed to do? Just go up and talk to her because she's new? And I said, that's exactly what you would do. But I think she didn't have empathy because she could not put herself in that girl's position. And so even if your child comes home saying there's a new kid in my class, to say, oh, wow, it's hard to remember sometimes what it was like to be the new person. What do you think they're feeling? What do you think that's been like? Questions like that, just as many creative questions as we can come up with.
Mm.
David, did you know it is only 2 months to Thanksgiving and 3 months to Christmas?
That cannot be.
It is. I pulled out fall decorations last weekend and it got me so excited about what's coming. If you want to refresh your space with new furniture and decor for the holiday season, from sofas to spatulas and everything you need for holiday hosting, like festive cookware, cozy bedding, and holiday decor galore.
The holidays can be stressful, but Wayfair makes it easy to get your home holiday ready.
Not only is my house full of Wayfair, but the Daystar house is as well. We are currently building on and we are filling this place with Wayfair.
My front room is a Wayfair showroom. Lamps, rugs, pillows, coffee table, basically almost everything but the dog.
But you know they have great dog products, don't you?
I bought a dog crate from them. There's almost nothing Wayfair can't cover.
There's something for every style and every home, no matter your space or budget. Free and easy shipping, even on the big stuff. They'll even help you set it up.
Wayfair is your one-stop holiday shop for everything on your to-do list this season. Head to wayfair.com right now to get your home holiday ready.
That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
Should we talk about some practicals?
Yes, you go first on the practicals.
My practical for empathy would be, as we think about giving that I mentioned a few minutes ago, I think it's so helpful when kids are a part of the nuts and bolts of that giving. So if we're going to make a meal for a neighbor who's sick, let kids go with you to the grocery store. and put some of the items in the cart. Littles can participate in that way. Let them be a part of cooking. As we're cooking, how do you think they're feeling that they've been in the hospital? Like all the opportunity in the preparation that I think is so needed as we approach the holidays. We've said before and would remind you again, let kids help pick out gifts for other family members. Let them write their own names on the cards. Let them draw if they can't write. Like, let them be a part of the nuts and bolts. It's back to Sissy's great reminder earlier, in this fast-paced world with a lot going on around us, just easier for us to do those things for them. And I think they miss a lot of the learning and the connecting of the dots of empathy when we do those things for them as opposed to them doing them themselves.
Yes.
What about you?
Well, I'm going to go back to Richard Weisbord and the Making Caring Common project, because he talked about a phenomenon that he referred to as Zoom, and that we can zoom in and we can zoom out, and that we want to help kids have an awareness in both places. And I love that idea because other than Zoom, we don't talk about Zoom much. And so I think that can be part of the vocabulary of your home, where you just have Zoom projects regularly. And a Zoom in project means we're going to think about someone who is experiencing some type of hardship or struggle, like you're saying, in close proximity to us, a family member, a neighbor, somebody we know really well. And what can we do for that person? That's zooming in. Zooming out is thinking about the wider world around us and what can we do to make a difference for a child in another country, like with something like Compassion or Justice and Mercy International, or what can we do to go build a habitat house or go on a mission trip somewhere? How can we think again about the wider world and zoom out? And then how can we zoom back in? And then maybe 1 week a month you have a zoom in week, and 1 week a month you have a zoom out week, or you alternate months and everybody together gets to vote on who you're zooming into and who you're zooming out to, or take turns picking. But that just gets folded into the practices that we have as a family.
I love that.
Empathy.
Such an important topic.
It's so important. Yes. Please, God, help us all continue to develop it, and the kids we love too.
Yes.
David, what a team we have that we get to call friends who help make this podcast possible.
Amanda Young, our operations manager.
Chris Starrett, our engineer.
Our management team at H Squared.
We are thrilled to be a part of the That Sounds Fun network.
Our music was created by the insanely talented Dave Haywood of Lady A.
And if this podcast felt helpful to you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, all the things.
We are grateful for you and cheering you on always.